Welcome to Brains Gone Bold. We're happy to have you joining us today. And boy, are we excited about today's session.
Yes.
We have a guest who is going to be joining us today to talk about
We are talking about so much good stuff. Oh, this is a good one.
Yes, all things smell and scent. I use those words interchangeably, although I probably should not. But Jeanine and I were having a conversation about the connection between when we smell things and the experience that we have.
How did it come up? Do you remember?
I brought it up somehow. I had smelled something that brought me back to a place in time that I didn't like.
That you didn't like. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, I remember it very clearly because it happens to me once every few years. And I don't know what the smell is or the scent, but it automatically happens in my body. And it takes me back to when I was young. I was little. For a very brief time in my life, I went to daycare. And my experience going to daycare was terrible. I remember crying. I remember crying to my mother every time I had to go that I didn't want to go to daycare. I remember the feeling that I had when I was there. And I even remember some of the things that they had us do while we were at daycare. It was really not my favorite place to be.
Yeah.
And for some reason, every few years, I'll be somewhere random and this scent just
Can you
hits
describe
me,
the scent?
and I
like,
get
is
sick
it
to my
diaper?
stomach.
Like, what is the scent?
I can't. Believe me, I have tried.
Okay.
Because I want to be able to kind of
and avoid it
or reframe it. Reframe it in some way.
Yeah.
But I cannot put my finger on it. I just know that it literally makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
So, I had that happen to me, and I know we all do in different ways. And it just is very interesting to me to understand the why behind it.
Yes.
And how do those scents get kind of programmed in our brain that brings us back to places and times that maybe we want to or we don't want to.
Right. And you guys know by now how curious we are. That's how things start for us. And so we start having this conversation and, I immediately start thinking of most of my memories associated with food are like good and happy memories.
Yeah.
And so I want to recreate them. I think about like my grandmother cooking sauce on Sundays or her gravy and, what that brings back and how much I miss grandma. Like all of that has this like wistful experience or the movies and, just whatever the thing is. And I think I've also shared with you some like perfumes or whatever that you smell that you immediately like, I don't like that smell, but it's because of somebody who used to wear it or whatever. And so it's interesting. And so we were excited to find somebody. Maria found this guest that, this is what she does, like for a living.
Yes.
Like she's smart. She's smart, y'all. Like we say we're not experts. I mean, she's an actual expert.
Yeah, she is. So we're curious about it. We are amateurs with curiosity. She is an expert.
Yes.
And so we want to introduce you to her. And in order to do her justice, I'm going to go ahead and read to you
probably best.
Kind of where she comes from and what she's done.
She deserves that honor.
She absolutely does. She does. We're super, super excited.
Yes.
So our guest today her name is Dr. Rachel Herz. She's a neuroscientist. She's a world-renowned expert in this field on the science of smell. She studies the powerful and often surprising connection between scent, memory, emotion, and human behavior. She has also shared her work, so she's been on multiple TED or TEDx stages talking about her research and how, as well as she is an author of several books. One is called The Scent of Desire. She has one called That's Disgusting. And she also has one more recently that's called Why You Eat What You Eat. We have it here with us here today, so we're hoping that you'll check it out. And she's also a consultant. She works with international corporations. She's an entrepreneur, and she serves on the faculty of Brown University. Most recently, she has been elected as the president of the International Society of Neurogastronomy. If you're wondering exactly what neurogastronomy is.
Because we were,
yes. It is the science of how our brain creates the experience of flavor. So really interesting work on, why it is, again, why we eat what we eat. And
a real expert, like not ones that play them on TV, an actual, like went to school for this kind of thing.
Yes. So please help us give a very warm welcome to Dr. Rachel Herz. Very happy for her to be joining us here today.
Much. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are really honored to have you here with us on the podcast today. So we have so many things that we'd like to talk with you about. This is a topic Jeanine and I have talked a little bit about. We certainly have a lot of curiosity around the role of scent and smell in our everyday lives and how that impacts us. I know the original conversation that we had was around the impacts of scent and smell on memory and how that triggers us back to certain times in our life. But before we even dive into all of that, we'd certainly like to hear more about you and for our audience, help everyone understand how did you get into this line of work?
Yes, I'm so interested.
Well, it's one of those circuitous paths of least resistance. Mm-hmm. So when I was an undergrad, I was in biology, and then towards the end of it, I switched into psychology, and I did an honors thesis that at the time was called biopsychology. Today it would be called neuroscience in terms of what I was doing with animals and brains and drugs and so forth. And then I stayed doing that for a little while longer for, a year, a gap year before a gap year was what everybody did.
Yeah.
And during that period of time, I realized that I didn't really want to do that kind of invasive work with animals. I thought, though, that I liked, animals, and I wanted to just kind of watch them in the wild. Giving too long of a story here. But anyway, the bottom line is I started my PhD basically in ecology, and it was studying birds, as a matter of fact, and spatial memory. So it does all connect in a way. Mm-hmm. And during that period of time, I realized this really actually wasn't floating my boat, but I had been really interested in somehow figuring out how to marry psychology and biology. So what could I study that really was an interface between the two? Mm-hmm. And I was actually reading a paper in one of the courses I was taking when I was a graduate student, and the authors had used smell to manipulate mood. And it was the very first time this had ever been done. And it was answering this critique in the field of mood manipulation research and mood and learning and memory research, that the techniques they had for manipulating mood were too contrived and confounded. And they were like, read these statements to make you feel happy, or read these statements to make you feel sad, and so on. And the argument that the authors used was that the sense of smell was interacting with a part of the brain that was deeply and kind of primordially, evolutionarily connected to emotion. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. And this was my background, evolutionary theory and so on and so forth in biology. And I went, aha. Yeah. Wow. That's how I can combine psychology and biology. And I was lucky enough to have a PhD advisor whose research was not at all in this area. Mm-hmm. He actually did emotion research, but from a completely different perspective. And when I told him what I wanted to do, he said, here's the rope, go hang yourself. Not exactly. But he said, fine, I can't help you, but, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so this was at the University of Toronto. I'm Canadian. And I cobbled together a committee. I have a really renowned memory person, someone who did biology and smell in animals, and then my thesis primary advisor, who was an emotion person. And I actually visited various places in the US at that time. I went to International Flavors and Fragrances, which is a major, as the name sounds, manufacturer of various kind of chemical preparations. And, the joke was, who's the crazy Canadian graduate student who just walks in the door and says, can you give me some smells? And not quite exactly that rough, but it was close enough. And anyway, they gave me materials I needed for my research. And they gave me some, how to do it kind of little mini class. I went to Brown University, where the person who really founded the field that studies the psychological science of smell was Trig Engen, who's unfortunately no longer with us. And he was wonderful. He sort of came from that era of gentleman scientists, and I stack of books and papers that I left his office with. I actually also went to Philadelphia, which is where the Monell Chemical Senses Center is, and where my first academic job after a postdoc was. And that's where they study, smell and taste really quite intensively. And I met with some other people at the University of Pennsylvania. And I came back and I said, okay. And I developed a paradigm to compare memories that were triggered by smell compared to memories that were triggered by other sensory cues, but of the same sort of stimulus. So for instance, if it was popcorn, you would have the smell of popcorn, or you would see popcorn, or you would hear popcorn popping, or you would feel popcorn kernels, or you would read the word popcorn. And what I was interested in was actually really tying back to this question of our sense the trigger for the most emotional memories. And this is just something that has been sort of said and taken as received wisdom, but there really wasn't any real kind of connected evidence for that. And I was really interested in this. It's sort of colloquially called the Proust phenomena. So like a memory suddenly comes back to you and you're really overwhelmed with this emotional experience.
Yes.
And I wanted to see if that was really true. And my thesis demonstrated that it was. So when people recalled a memory that was triggered by the smell of the popcorn, for example, their experience of the memory was significantly more emotional. And then later research I found was also more evocative. That is, you're really brought back to that original time and place much more so than if you're recalling the exact same event. So you still remember going to the movie theater with your grandfather to watch Bambi when you were 6.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That was, I swear, she just described
bring you back?
Popcorn and my grandfather at a movie, but it was actually King Kong. Way too young.
Okay, wonderful. So the memory is the same, but it feels very different.
Yeah.
Well, if I may kind of elaborate on this a little bit, can you help us understand? So when we have, I'm going to call it a scent memory. That's, I'm sure, not the correct terminology for it. But when we have a scent memory, is it true that we have that memory more so because there was an emotion associated with that time and place?
Oh, that's a good question.
So that's a really, really good question. And the answer is actually no. So you could be having just the same emotional experience. So like I said, going to see King Kong with your grandfather, there are a lot of emotions around that event. Maybe seeing the bucket of popcorn, or somebody even saying, remember when you went to see King Kong with your grandfather, you would have a memory of the event, but it would not be nearly as emotionally involving. And it's actually because of the part of the brain that's involved with our perception and experience of smell that is driving this really emotional, unique potency. And that's because it's the exact same part of the brain that's also processing emotion. So the amygdala, which is part of the primary olfactory cortex, where the conscious perception of our, smelling takes place. And we go, oh, I'm smelling rose, I'm smelling vinegar, or whatever the case might be. That part of the brain is also processing emotion at the exact same time. And none of our other senses has the same kind of connection to that part of the brain. And another really central neurological feature or neuroanatomical feature is this other region called the hippocampus, which is conjoined with the amygdala. And that's where learning and memory are taking place. And actually the emotional memory is also involved with the amygdala. But learning, the connection, the smell, the popcorn, the emotions all around, whatever, even if you're not paying attention to the smell at the time, it's being coded with it. And then the memory bringing you back there. This is a really unique feature of the sense of smell that none of our other senses has.
It's so interesting because I think about, obviously, what you've described, and using my grandfather clearly made it really real for me. But does that then also, I think about, it's such a positive experience because it's such a positive memory with popcorn. And I, to this day, absolutely love popcorn. I really think that was my first memory of actually going to a movie theater. And I don't like scary things. And King Kong was definitely scary for me. And I was probably 6 or 7. Shouldn't have seen it. But anyway, with that being said, is that then, because of that memory being so connected, giving me then positive experiences with going to a movie theater going forward?
So you're actually bringing up something else, which is really fascinating about our experience of emotion in memory, which smell really capitalizes on. So the emotion that you're experiencing, let's say I gave you some popcorn to smell now and you went, this is reminding me of when I went to see King Kong with my grandfather when I was 6. And I have this really happy, nostalgic, special memory. It's really positive and so on and so forth. Well, it could very easily have been at the time when you were smelling the popcorn in the movie theater that you were terrified, you were upset, you were scared. It was, the emotion was actually not so positive. I mean, it was maybe a blend of different emotions. I like being with my grandfather. It's, oh, I'm at a movie theater. It's so cool and whatever. But this movie is really scary and it's upsetting and, a variety of different kinds of things. But it's the meaning of the event to you, the memory event to you at the time that you're recalling it, that determines the emotion you're experiencing. So that can change over time. And my favorite example of doing some, the sort of steps of this is with the cologne that your boyfriend wore in high school. And, when you first got together, when you smell that cologne, it was like your heart doesn't stop beating. You were madly in love. It's so great. You love that smell. And then you're at the high school prom and he dumps you in front of everybody. And it's the worst experience of your life. You hate the guy, you hate the perfume or the cologne rather. And, it's all this really negative memory. It's so humiliating, embarrassing, awful, et cetera, et cetera. Fast forward 15 years, walking down the street, somebody walks right by you, same cologne. And you're like, oh my God. And you start laughing because it's bringing you back to that idiot.
Yeah.
But now it's funny. It's like, remember when I was younger. And
so that's three very different experiences of the same scent over periods of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right. Do we have the ability to manipulate our experience of scent? So go ahead.
Okay. So no, the answer is absolutely. So what I like to say is, aromatherapy is real, but not the way people, the way that aromatherapy proponents would have you believe, like, smell this and everyone's going to feel the same way. And it is a fact that lavender is relaxing, or it is a fact that rosemary is energizing and so forth. That is absolutely not true. And it's not a pharmacological mechanism that is making you feel this way or not feel this way. It has to do with your own personal past experiences with the scent. So if, for example, you never smelled lavender before, smelling it is not going to relax you. If you don't like the smell of lavender because of, let's say, bad past experiences, it's certainly also not going to relax you.
Marketing's amazing.
Marketing is huge with the sense of smell because this is another really cool thing about the sense of smell is smells are invisible. And we as humans are constantly looking for what is it? What is it? What is it? And if you tell me something about whatever I'm experiencing through smell, chances are, unless it's wildly opposing my experience, that I'm going to believe you. And especially with things like fragrance and the purported effects, or even for perfume, which is not really claiming any aromatherapy, but it's like, the imagery of success and seduction and fantasticness, whatever, you are set up to feel like, okay, I want to wear that because of the connotation or the celebrity that you really admire and so forth. So all of that is making you perceive the magical elixir in that bottle in a particular kind of way that has not, like if you just, were in a sterile room and I unstoppered a vial that looked like, something in a chemistry class and just presented it to you, you would have a completely different experience. So what I like to say in terms of your question is that anyone can create their own personal apothecary by taking scents that they actually, the key here is not fragrances that you already know really well. So like the smell of vanilla and coffee, even if you like those smells, would not be ones to try to use when you're trying to manipulate yourself in this way. But, getting a set of different kind of scents that you've collected, maybe going to some kind of a shop where you can get, essential oils, and essential oils are not the key ingredient here. It can be, I'm just using that as an example to find, like little vials like this, for instance, that you hadn't had experience with. Then you get yourself into a certain mood, however you want it to be, listen to some music that you love and dance around, or sit meditatively, or whatever the case might be, and smell that at the same time. And then later, when you want to feel invigorated, or if you want to feel focused and relaxed, smell it. And that would be
that is a cool thought.
That is absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. Yes.
So we in the car on the way here literally had a conversation about lavender, or I said my doctor was using this oil that really helped my muscles, whatever. And she was like, "Oh, is there lavender in it?" And I was like, "I don't know." But we automatically associate that with calming. But people who work in the field of lavender don't fall asleep right there.
Yeah. Right. Well, we also were talking about how two people can have very different experiences of the same scent. Is there any detail that you can share with us about that? Why would we have a different sense of it aside from our past experiences of it? So if Jeanine and I were coming into a scent that neither of us had smelled before, and I love it and she is repulsed by it,
so what's going on there is the fact that actually every two people, or everybody rather, has a unique nose. And unless you have an identical twin who's gone through all the exact same epigenetic effects as you, no one has the same olfactory receptors that are expressed and tuned as you do to the billions of chemicals that are out there that we can potentially perceive. And what this means, the real issue here is that, and both of you have a normal sense of smell. However, the fact that you have not exactly the same olfactory receptors expressed, there's a possibility of over 1,000, and each of you has between, let's say, 350 to 400 different types of those 1,000 receptors. And you also have different numbers of those particular receptors that are responsive. And what this means is that in certain cases, you may not be able to perceive something that someone else does because you're missing the receptor to be able to detect it. So the sort of classic example here is cilantro. People either tend to love it or hate it.
Yes.
The people who hate it think it smells like soap because they're actually missing the receptor for the herbaceous, really green herbal quality that people love.
Okay.
So there's an example of, this is an example of a common instance where a lot of people have it or they don't have it. It's often referred to when it's a don't have it that many people have is a specific anosmia, but we each individually have our own little specific anosmias to certain things which we can't really pick up and other people can, and so on. Now, it's also the case that someone could have a lot of receptors that are reacting to the herbaceous, really delicious note in cilantro, but because they have so many of those receptors, it's really strong. So they may actually find it aversive because it's like, whoa, this is super strong.
Too much.
Jeanine, you may go perfect amount, and maybe Marie is like, I can't really smell it. So, and that has to do with the genetics that are inside our nose.
Do we smell what we taste? Like, so if you didn't, I'm just thinking of anything that you put in your mouth, but if you didn't go and instead just went straight to the mouth, is there still that connection then that you talk about that brings not just memory, but just the overwhelming, it's too much, it's too little, it's too this, it's too that?
100%. So actually the sense of taste is only salt, sour, sweet, bitter, and umami. Everything else that we perceive when we're eating comes from the aromatics and our sense of smell. So for example, bacon tastes like salt, and there are 150 different volatile organic compounds in the bacon bouquet that we are inhaling and perceiving at the exact same time as the taste of salt. So what happens is there's an open airway system between our mouth and our nose. And you probably know this from if you have a really bad cold and your nose is blocked, or allergies, food doesn't taste right. Or maybe you remember when you were a kid, holding something like, some kind of drink in your mouth, someone's making you laugh, and all of a sudden it comes out your nose. So that's like demonstrating there's this open system.
Yeah.
And breathing is the key. So while we're eating, we're inhaling. We inhale when we have something in our mouth. And then the exhalation brings the aromatics that are in our mouth up through this open airway from the back of the mouth into the nose and whooshes by the olfactory receptors. And so at the exact same time that we're tasting the salt, we are having that sensation of the olfactory sensory neurons being activated with all those volatiles. And your brain is actually putting it together and creating this perception, which is referred to as flavor in the true sense of it, as the connection between the smell and the taste of the food. But because it's in our mouth that we're chewing the food, we think it's all happening in our mouth. And because, we say taste in the mouth, people always say taste, but I like to go around, no, it's not taste, because it's, so many things taste like salt, but only bacon tastes like bacon, smoked
and that's
salmon.
Because of the smell then?
The difference.
So you're saying, let's say a potato chip and a piece of bacon. So you put both of them in their mouth. They're both salty. Your tongue is only going salt, salt, salt. It's the sense of smell that's distinguishing this is bacon and this is a potato chip.
Yes. I mean, there's also textural things too. So like, that kind of, but for example, a piece of raw potato and an apple slice of the same dimensions,
might have the same
you would
texture.
not be able to tell the difference between them if it were not for the sense of smell.
Interesting.
Right.
I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
That's a great example.
So for instance, during COVID, a lot of people said they lost their sense of taste.
We both
most of them actually did not lose the ability to detect sweet or salty or bitter. They lost their sense of smell. And so everything that they were consuming felt like, we say taste because it's just totally off, totally wrong. Chocolate's not tasting like anything. It's actually probably was still tasting a little sweet and bitter. But the other interesting thing about when it comes to food, when we have that smell happening at the same time as the taste is actually stronger. So chocolate is sweeter when we also smell the chocolate aroma than it is if we blocked our nose and had the piece of chocolate in our mouth.
Cool.
They work as a team to help us get the full experience.
Like you and I.
Yes,
and they synergize
exactly.
each other. So it's synergistic team, like the both of you.
Yeah. I'm interested in knowing because you brought up COVID, and I happen to be one of those people who, thankfully, for a temporary period of time, did lose my sense of smell when I first got COVID. And I say temporary, it's probably about 6 months before I feel like it more fully came back. And I went through I bought a scent therapy kit and all kinds of things to try and really bring it back. And my experience during that time was, wow, how much I was missing my lived experience of things. And I started thinking about the mental health aspects, if there are any, and I think there are, of our connection between scent and all of our senses, of course. But can you speak at all about the connection between mental health conditions or experiences and our sense of smell?
So absolutely. And there's a very profound and very real connection between the function of our sense of smell and our mental health. And actually, diminished sense of smell is very highly correlated to an increase in negative mental health conditions, particularly depression, but also anxiety. And anxiety, as you probably know, is kind of a precursor state often to depression. But there's very clear evidence, and particularly in the clinical literature with people who have serious major depression, that when they are in actually an episode of depression, their sense of smell is actually weaker during that episode. And then when they get back to normal, their sense of smell also gets back to normal. And it's also the case that losing your sense of smell can have a direct impact on your mental state and actually precipitate a depression, even if you had no predisposition to becoming depressed. And this is because I told you that part of the brain, the amygdala, that's activated when we're smelling and also activated when we're experiencing emotion. If you're not getting any input from the smell side, the emotion starts to derail, and it can go in all kinds of directions. And so and particularly happens negatively, where people have, enter into depressions, and it can actually get worse over time the longer you don't have a sense of smell. So unfortunately, for some people, losing their sense of smell can really lead to serious mental health conditions, and particularly depression. But there's also connections with other mental health conditions, even schizophrenia, PTSD. So there's a variety of different kinds of emotional states that are really impacted by smell. And interestingly, it's typically a bidirectional relationship. So smell impacting how your emotional state is, either positive or negative,
right?
And your ability to smell impacting your emotional state.
So I'm sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
Can the sense of smell, or can you then, if you are in a depressive state, can smell be something that could be curative, or did you have to train on that? Like you were talking about the apothecary earlier.
So that's a really, really good question. I don't have, a good necessarily clinical answer to that. I mean, remembering a couple of things here. So depending upon, if you're in a state of depression and your sense of smell may be weaker during that time, it actually, I think in general, so I think it's brain healthy to be actively sniffing as much as we can. So like going to the nose gym on a daily basis. And I would say there'd be, no harm. So this is like the no harm example of it. But again, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a PhD, that smelling things that you like, even if they were weaker than you kind of want them to be or that they usually are, would only be beneficial from the point of view of your mental state, because, I like the smell. So even though it's not quite as intense as it was, when I was feeling better, I still can get it. I still really enjoy, let's say, the smell of lilac, or the smell of vanilla, or the smell of a perfume that somebody that I loved wore. So all those things which can make us feel good. And actually the active sniffing is good for our mental and cognitive health. So something that actually is preventative from the point of view of cognitive decline, especially in aging, is keeping your sense of smell healthy. And one of the ways to do that is by deliberate active smelling every day. So like, I showed you this little thing. I mean, I have, because I get them from all over the place of people sending this to me, but I make a point of actually not just sort of passive inhaling and, somebody's cooking something or whatever, but taking an inhalation and really sniffing at least a couple of things every single day. And it just takes a couple of seconds. And the best thing to do, and probably Maria, you did this when you were working with your therapy kit, is it's not just, okay, let's just say, for instance, one of the smells is suntan lotion. So let's say you really like suntan lotion and you sniff your suntan lotion, and you don't just go suntan lotion to yourself, but you might go the beach and a vacation and something like that. So you're kind of connecting a thought or a memory with the smell. And this is what's really, really good for cognitive health. And also in the smell training case of trying to help bring back your sense of smell again, like kind of making the connections again between both your brain and thoughts and the perception of the sense. So it's like an interaction there.
Yeah. So is it true, the scents that you are smelling regularly, are they the same, or do you switch them up on a day-to-day basis? Because is it true that we get used to smells and scents we can't actually
desensitize to it?
Or, okay. Right.
Exactly. So I'm really glad you said that, because I was going to try to weave that into what I said before. So you don't want to just stick with your, for vanilla, eucalyptus, suntan lotion, and a perfume, for instance, and that's all you're smelling on and on again and again. You want to, in the smell training scenario, the sort of technique is you start with 4 distinctive scents. So you don't want them to all be, let's say, all perfumes or all, body products or something like that. 4 distinctive scents. And then you want to smell them a couple of times a day, sniff and think about it. And you can do that for, several weeks, 12, even 16 weeks, having that same set. And then you want to switch to another set of 4 different smells. This is if you're only just sniffing like a couple of seconds, a couple of times a day. If you're doing more than that, then you probably want to switch it up even more frequently. And the best thing to do, just in terms of going to the gym, as it were, the barbell practice with your nose, is to just smell as many things as you can, any day, anywhere. So it doesn't really matter if you go to the spice jar and you pick up the same thing twice in the same day, but you want to kind of walk around your kitchen, walk around your bathroom, walk around wherever and pick up different things, open the lid, take a sniff, think about it, put it back. That's sort of, in my perspective, the ideal way to maximize sort of the cognitive and the emotional benefits of your sense of smell.
So I hear you telling us to stop and smell the roses. Exactly. Had to throw that in there.
Thank you.
I'm interested in learning a little bit. Jeanine and I do a lot of work together with companies and with leaders of companies. And I'm curious to know if there is a connection between smell or scent and things like productivity and well-being at work and that sort of thing. And specifically, if we maybe have a missed opportunity in using scent to increase overall well-being of employees at work. Is that something that you can speak on?
Yeah. So basically just extrapolating from what I said about sort of the mechanisms of, aromatherapy and your personal apothecary. If you, it's definitely good. The ambience first of all, the ambience and environment of a workplace definitely impacts perceptions of well-being and motivation. And, if there's like fluorescent lighting and the hum and it's like, a really dull visual environment and so forth, that's not, the best atmosphere for work. So the more that you can make it sort of more positive and also multi-sensorily positive, that's just going to enhance the physical environment in a, I would say, generally positive way. But when you're bringing in smell to, let's say, a workplace, again, you don't want to be having the same smell just constantly piped in there, because so the way that this sort of adaptation habituation works with, you can't smell the smell that you've been, exposed to, works is that if, let's say you walk into a bakery and you're first walk in and you smell all the cakes and the breads and everything, it smells amazing. And then you're in there for 15 minutes or so trying to figure out what dessert you're going to get for dinner. By the time you get to the cash register to say, what cake you want, you can barely smell the bakery anymore. So you walk outside the bakery, you put some more money on the meter for your car. I'm just making up the story.
Right.
Then you walk back into the bakery and now you can smell the bakery again, like full force. However, people that work at the bakery, you might think, wow, they're so lucky. They get to smell cakes and breads all day long, but they can barely smell it at all. Even though they go home for, 16 hours a day or whatever, the fact that they have been in this constant exposure means that even when they come back, they can barely detect it. And it seems to take about 2 weeks of really being out of the environment before you can come back and smell it again.
Okay.
So for the worker environment, you do not want the same smell to be constantly in there. And it's also going to be the case that Jeanine may like the smell that they're piping in this week, but Maria, you really hate it.
I did think of that. Yes.
You don't want to necessarily. And the other thing is when you impose scent on people, they also really don't like it. Yeah. So the people that live above the bakery and can smell that, the cookies and so forth, actually can't stand it because they feel like, this often happens, not everybody, but often happens. They feel they're being assaulted. Like, I didn't ask to smell the cookies and I'm actually making this garlic pasta dish and I'm smelling cookies and it's really annoying me. So this feeling of having it imposed on you, not having the control, that's also a negative. Like, people don't like that. But from the point of view of having like little productivity kit with you, having like the little sense that you've personally connected to feeling more focused or feeling more energized or whatever the case might be. And when you're having a dip or feeling distracted, take a little sniff and that could be helpful.
Okay. You had used the time frame of about 2 weeks where you have to be out of that environment before you can come back in and smell it in the same strong way that you did originally. But you also had used the example of being in the bakery, trying to decide what you want to have. And just during those 15 minutes, your sense of that smell has decreased significantly. Is there a certain time period that happens within? Is 15 minutes the window, or is there a certain number of minutes we can smell something that strongly?
So there's two different mechanisms going on. The one where you walk into the bakery, which is what's happening there after you've been there for a few minutes or so, is adaptation. And that's actually a physiological phenomena that's happening with the interaction of the chemical and the olfactory receptors that are responding to it, where the receptors actually stop being able to respond to it. And they basically get saturated with the chemical compound and they dive back into the cell body and they're not there to be able to detect anymore. And then what happens when you leave that environment is these receptors are circulated, they're sort of recycled through the cell. And then when they pop back up on the surface again and can now be ready to perceive it. That can happen in as few as 30 seconds, basically, and it depends on the chemical. It also depends to a certain extent on the receptors of the individual that are expressed and able to respond. It seems as if the top end is 20 minutes. So for sure, 20 minutes, you're not going to be able to really detect it. Sometimes, depending on the chemical and the person, it can happen really quickly. And it also depends on things like temperature. So, and how much of the chemical there is in there. So for example, if you had a pot of tomato sauce bubbling on the stove where there's a lot of aromatics coming out, you're going to perceive that quite intensely. And that adaptation is going to happen sooner than if it was just a warm, I can sort of smell tomato sauce when I walk into the kitchen, and you'd probably be able to smell it for longer because there's not as much volatility. But it's still the case that basically 20 minutes in the kitchen and can't smell the pasta sauce anymore. Now, if you worked like in the bakery or in a pasta sauce factory, you would have a different mechanism taking place, which is this habituation. It's unclear. And this one includes leaving. So you're not exposed to the chemicals anymore, but you still have this really hard time being able to perceive it. And this 2-week window seems to be the right amount of time to get released from this habituation. And it's actually still really unclear why that's the case. And it seems to be a combination of physiological mechanisms as well as psychological kind of cognitive mechanisms. And so what's thought is that if you're constantly in the environment with a chemical and breathing it in all the time, it's actually also potentially getting, somewhat into your bloodstream, and your receptors are constantly basically exposed to it just because blood in the brain and everywhere else. And so it's sort of constantly turning on those receptors. And so they're dampened down. But that doesn't seem to be the whole story. There seems to be also a cognitive component to it that is producing this decrease in perception. So one of the things that's so fascinating about the sense of smell is we still don't really completely understand how it works. So that's
still more research to do, right?
Yes. I'm going to assume there's so like, I think from a marketing perspective and our program Lead Right, wouldn't it be great if we could come up with a universal scent that we bring in our candle and everybody leaves going, this was the best program I've ever been to. I am more effective, all because we've curated this great. I'm assuming there is no universal scent.
There is no universal scent. However, your little manipulation you're thinking of isn't entirely far-fetched. So if you had a scent that was novel, but you work to sort of have it be in a kind of familiar category. So let's say kind of a sweet-ish, vanilla-y kind of category. I mean, this is what, new fragrances, they're all different, but they're kind of the same. So you have it, so you can hopefully feel like people aren't going to go, oh my God, this is terrible, but it is unusual. So you want to kind of work with a perfumer, create something unusual and that people haven't smelled before, and then create the most fabulous experience for everybody while they're doing this event with you, while that scent is in the room, and, different sorts of things you do with them during the day. I mean, one of the things that's, I talk to people that do scent marketing and how do we make our retail environment more conducive for people purchasing, or the resort, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I think is important is, for example, in the resort, for instance, you have the scent that's in the lobby, and that same fragrance is in the little things you have in your hotel room, the soaps and shampoos that you're going to steal. And when you're back home, you're smelling that again going, oh, I had such a fantastic time when I was at this resort. So you could do a very similar sort of thing. And
the association.
Everyone have those candles in there.
So we need to create a Lead Right perfume that we can send home with everyone.
Or the candle idea is a really good one. So you have that scent, let's say, throughout your event, and then your swag
have a goodie bag.
You have the little candle. Or,
we need to stop giving out pens. Give out candles.
No more pens. Yes. So what I'm interested in knowing what you're excited about right now in the research that you're seeing, that you're doing in the field of all things scent.
Well, so like I said, it's still somewhat of a black box. And that is actually really fascinating from every dimension, because there's always something new to learn, more to explore, more things that could be. And one of the things I do a lot of is a lot of advocacy, trying to convince people that their sense of smell is really important, and kind of figuring out ways to really bring that home is something that I'm, quite passionate about, and all the things that smell can do. I mean, I'm really interested in figuring out how to leverage scent. I mean, you just gave some examples to me in a business kind of setting, like how could we do this or that? But there's all kinds of ways that scent can be used, from business to society to safety to medicine. I mean, for example, when we're sick, our body odor changes. And the chemical signature that's associated to various diseases is actually fairly distinctive.
That's why dogs and other animals can pick that up.
Exactly. But there's ways of trying to figuring out, how do we figure out what that chemical signature is, and then in fact have some kind of an automated system being able to do that. So for instance, you could be on a telehealth appointment with your doctor, with a little connection to your laptop that's picking up your volatile signature and coding that, and then giving the information to your physician who's like,
incredible.
Maybe we need to check you for prediabetes because you're actually, there's acetone that's being picked up or whatever. So like, that's actually a real thing. And in fact, doesn't even have to be, just connected by a screen. It could be the case that actually doctors use it more deliberately in their office, like actually, a breath profile detector, for instance, which would be helpful and not just a blood test, and certainly a lot less invasive than a blood test, just as tiny examples.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of ways which I feel like scent can be used. There's also the really fascinating direction that various people are taking up, trying to figure out sort of a basic code for olfaction. Like we have, in vision, we have specific, red, green, blue receptors for detection of light and so forth. And there really isn't, because of all the complexities, such a simple code or any kind of simple code for the sense of smell. But there may be ways of kind of devising a kind of a prototypical alphabet. Like it's not exact to what you're experiencing, but you can kind of get to some sort of descriptive dimension for smell through a set of quote unquote primaries, which can then at least be relatable so that we have a way of communicating that with each other, even if it's not the identical experience that we're each having, and working on that and being able to apply that to technology where we can then really have a multimodal, multisensory experience of something, which has eluded the media and entertainment industry. And there's all kinds of reasons why there's a difficulty there. But, bringing that into a greater level of both technological and scientific understanding and development, there could be there are really interesting things that could be done with that. So there's all sorts of things I'm very excited by.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I think about, like Disney, obviously so I'm here in Florida, and Disney is huge. Years ago, I remember going to one of their studios and they incorporated scent into the experience. And so when the stink bug shows up, all of a sudden in the theater, you smell stink and other things that go on. And I've been hearing about this for a really long time, about how, we're going to have scent television where when you are watching a commercial, you smell the perfume that they're, or the cleansing thing. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about the medical. I didn't even think about the medical uses for it.
Yeah.
But wow, what an incredible ability to be able to do that, because we don't maximize on all the tools that we have available to us. I mean, we were definitely incredibly and intelligently designed to cure, ourselves if we use all the things that we have at our faculties. So.
Right.
And it's also, I mean, I'm glad you sort of brought this up, that sort of listening to your body. I mean, because what will smell good to you and make you feel good is not going to be necessarily the same thing that makes somebody else feel good.
Right.
And that's where I bring in this cautiousness with like this idea of a scent alphabet that we could then like have everyone kind of quote unquote smelling rose. But that perception is maybe going to be positive for some person, not positive to someone else. And not just because I like rose and you don't like rose, but because the way that I'm perceiving that is different from you. And it's not hitting like all the right buttons in the same way. But nevertheless, but I think that's important to know. Like you have to sort of listen to yourself and not just get told, okay, this is what this is, even though language is so powerful with smell. It's also a question of kind of aligning it with yourself and knowing, for example, I really like this other smell. A lot of people say they don't like it, but I do. That's great.
Yeah. And I think we all have those, if I think back, I know, I'm not sure how many people feel this way, but the smell of gasoline, I absolutely adore, which I think is a little strange.
I don't hate it.
Yeah. And
it is a common one. I get told that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And that's because of associations, probably. Like that's what I always hear from people is like the, pumping gas with my dad or whatever.
Yes,
or like
my dad ran a gas station.
Right. There you go. Yeah. I told Jeanine this morning of a story. My son, when he was, I think about 3, we were driving down the road and there was clearly someone had run over a skunk. And he just randomly said, "PU, someone needs to change his diaper." But as we're having this conversation, and even before that, I was talking with Jeanine about it. And I have to wonder, where did he learn that was a scent that was maybe negative and so
Because mommy probably went, PU, we need to change your diaper.
I don't know.
So that's actually really fascinating because I, in fact, love the smell of skunk. And the reason why is as a kid, 5 years old in the backseat of my parents' car, driving, the windows down, summer, bucolic, everything's lovely. And all of a sudden there's a scent coming, wafting through the window.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom says, oh, I love that smell. She didn't say skunk. She just said, oh, I love that smell. And I'm like, mommy loves it. This is great.
Yes.
I love the smell. It wasn't until I was several years older and that scent was also somewhere in the vicinity and I was with other kids and I said, oh, I love that smell. And they went, ew, you're so weird, gross, that's skunk. So I had no idea. Mm-hmm. And actually, and I've had colleagues from Europe, skunks are not indigenous to Europe, with me here in Rhode Island. And in the springtime or summertime, and a skunk has gone by, and I say, "What do you think of that with the smell?" And they're like, "Oh, it's okay." They don't know. They don't know anything about it.
They've not been told what to think.
But intensity is also a really key feature here. Yeah. So I am obviously not responding to like, "Oh my God, it's so strong, it's awful." Someone else, maybe your son also feels like it's a very strong smell and maybe also associates, maybe there's something that he's picking up that reminds him of a smelly diaper smell. So, and in fact, this mercaptan quality, which is in the skunk bouquet, is a scent that has, is connected to fecal aroma and so on. So he may truly be picking that up and parsing that into his past knowledge of what smells are.
The connections are so amazing. I mean, honestly, Rachel, we could talk to you forever and we are both absolutely fascinated by this topic and appreciate your willingness to indulge us. We are not scientific. We are not researchers. It is more just a curiosity and fascination, which is really how we approach every topic we talk about.
Yeah, we're happy that you are because we really wanted to dive into this. So thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having me. You've asked amazing questions and your energy is infectious.
Are there any takeaways that you would like to leave our audience with in terms of calls to action as it relates to their own sense of smell that you'd like to share?
Well, so, the idea of stopping to smell the roses is really, really critical and realizing, paying attention to things that you're experiencing through smell or taking a minute to go, oh my God, I didn't realize when I walked into this room, there's a smell to it because the sense of smell is really involved in every aspect of our lives. And when people lose it, everything about their life often starts to unravel, not just food, not just, I can't smell the gas that may be, leaking out of the stove or whatever, but social relationships, emotions, as you've already heard me talk about, your sense of self, your connection to your own sense of self. And like, being able to smell yourself or being able to have memories that are connected to your past through your senses, through that. I mean, just about everything is connected to our sense of smell that we just don't pay any attention to. And it's really this really unfortunate thing when people lose it and can say, oh my God, I totally took it for granted. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I really want people to sort of realize and appreciate and use their sense of smell because, like I said, it's positive for mental health. It's positive for cognitive health. And, it's good for you.
For sure.
Well, I know I've certainly taken some things away from this that I will incorporate into.
I have a page full of notes.
Right. So thank you again so much for joining us. And we'll certainly be following your work and excited to see what's next.
And sharing with our listeners as well.
Indeed. Yes. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Wow. So that was a really great conversation.
I could have talked about forever, right?
I agree with you. We certainly could have made this an 8-hour podcast. Which
she had to leave us.
Unfortunately, she had to go. So Jeanine and I are sticking around to continue talking about it just a little bit more with all of you.
I hope that you guys were as fascinated as we were.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's certain things that stick out for us and maybe not others, but this is one of those things. I mean, you can cure ailments. You can you can change the way you think about something, help your depression, help your mood. I mean, just so many things.
Yes. Oh, I think one of the biggest things I took away from it is the fact that we do not pay enough attention to our sense of smell and the impacts, to your point, that it can have on our entire being, our entire existence, our experience of life. We just kind of are passive experiencers.
We're just moving through life.
Right? We don't stop and smell the roses enough. So we need to start being smellers a little bit more intentionally.
Although it's kind of creepy. I'm not going to walk up.
I know. Please don't do that in my neck or anything. That'd be a little weird. But I love that she used the terminology nose gym.
Yes.
We need to go to the nose gym every day and really exercise that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm definitely going to curate some sort of apothecary.
Yeah.
I just think that is such a cool thought. And I would have, I'm so glad she said, because I was writing down, how do I do this? And she, walked through it anyway. But to do scents that you don't have familiarity with, that is, I think, really interesting because I would have never thought that.
Exactly. Yeah, because we get comfortable with what we know, of course. And there are certain ones that we know we like. She used the vanilla reference,
which is such a familiar.
It is a very common, familiar
it's
one.
ubiquitous. You walk, every candle has vanilla and sandalwood, or vanilla and this, or vanilla. And that lavender thing, though, really threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
Because we all accept the fact that lavender is calming and relaxing. Think about giving your baby a bath. It's a lavender chamomile. Yes. That means nothing. It means nothing. That's bullshit. Like, we have been fed a line. We've all believed it. As a collective. Yes. Right? We all believe it.
Yes.
I really feel like we need to figure out what a universal scent is and then have everybody start using that scent because Jeanine and Maria invented it.
I love it. I love the idea. We're going to become scent makers from this one podcast. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
I think what you're kind of referring to in a way is, we asked her, can you manipulate our experiences of scent? And she said, absolutely, and gave us ways to do that. And I'm so fascinated by, okay, so I want a scent that I want to feel happy about, even though maybe in the past I haven't. Let's create a happy experience that I then bring that scent into to kind of reprogram my brain or my sense of smell around
everything.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that we have way more control over these things than probably we give ourselves credit for.
First of all, again, I know we've already said it and I feel like I'm fangirling here, but I was super, super fascinated, even from how she talked about getting into the field. It's not what she originally intended. She took a left turn, but she curated that. Just like we can talk about curating how the scents that we choose to surround us with, although not for too long, we don't want to desensitize ourselves to it. It was really helpful to think about that.
Yeah.
I've worked in a donut shop and I get it. Yeah. Because I love donuts, the idea that at some point I'm not going to love donuts, or I'm going to be so immune to the deliciousness because of the smell. And it did happen. Like, you didn't walk in every day going, donuts.
Yeah.
It was like, ugh, donuts. Right. So it changed. Now, I think it probably was, I was only there for a little while. It doesn't matter. That's another story. But it's fascinating how joy, again, donuts, there's so much joy in that. Some of it's taste, but it's apparently more smell than it is taste.
Exactly. Right.
Oh, it's exciting.
Right.
It's exciting.
It is. We have so much more to learn about it. Yeah.
We do. Yeah. And she's a researcher and said the same thing.
Exactly.
That it's like a black box. There's just so much more to uncover. And so that book, will you hold it up again?
Absolutely.
So I haven't read this book, but as a person who lifelong pursuit of trying to figure out why I overeat, why I do the things that I do. It feels like, I don't know for sure, but it feels like there's got to be some keys in that to smell.
And there are donuts on the cover.
And there are donuts. It just feels like, I'm just saying. But honestly, it just feels like there's some keys or solutions for us that are untapped resources that I would have never thought about.
Yeah.
This was about scent and memory. Why do we have these? But then to find out there's this actual productive, thing.
Right. There's so much more to it.
Again, mood, depression. I think she said PTSD. She labeled quite a few things.
Yes.
So
I would encourage you to check out all of her books.
We'll link them,
especially this one. Yes, we will link them in our bio, in our YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about her work specifically outside of her books, rachelherz.com. You can find all kinds of things about her there.
She's got a contact me form, so
yes,
you can reach with her directly.
Reach out to her directly. You can find her books on Amazon. Certainly feel free to continue learning about this topic as we will as well. So Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Brains Gone Bold. We hope you've enjoyed this little detour we've taken today, which is a little outside of our norm. And we hope to continue doing this more often. So thank you again. We'll see you next time.